Alright everyone, my name is Jared and I am with TechWorks, and today we're going to talk about tablets. Now, not just iPads and not just a specific model in general, but kind of tablets as a whole. And are they still relevant today? Do you need one? Why should you get one? And kind of where I am anticipating tablets to go from here. So, if you can remember, back in the day, tablets weren't really popular until the iPad. So the iPad, the original, which I happen to still have right here, the original chunky, thick metal iPad came out in 2011. Now, at the time, this was a really big deal because before that, we had small little phones. At the time, we were rocking, if you were in the Apple world, you were rocking the iPhone 4 and 4S. And if you were an Android, more than likely you probably had a Galaxy S3, maybe S4, I don't know which one it was exactly up to. My point being is you were rocking a 4-inch phone. You were rocking something smaller than today's iPhone 7 and 8. Very tiny. It probably took up, on this iPad, probably up to about here and over. That was it. That was your cell phone. So a very small screen real estate. And with the introduction of the smartphone, this whole touchscreen philosophy with the iPhone, everything was kind of crammed in there. So the first iPad came out, and it was an instant success because now you have all that great content that you were using on your phone, your apps, your emails, your everything, faster and quicker on a tablet, and also bigger. So for people who wanted to see it, couch reading, couch checking your emails, whatever, you could see it on a much bigger screen. This was a 10-inch screen, 4:3 aspect ratio, and this one specifically is a 32 gigabyte model. So that was a pretty big deal back then. I believe actually this was a higher end iPad when it was purchased. So this was huge then. Had a headphone jack, you could stand it up with a stand, you could, show your photos, you could play your music, had a little music player. Apple really killed it with the iPad. Now, fast forward several years to a point where I think was more of a turning point for tablets, and I'll tell you why. So this right here is a Nexus 7, the first one. And I believe this came out in 2012, 2013. There's two of them. Just the Wi-Fi one. And this was a big deal for me because this was a smaller tablet. I actually purchased this for my girlfriend for school. And it was something that she could take to class, and at the time she didn't have a smartphone, so this was, a big screen for her. But for me, at the time, I had a Nexus 6. And anyone who's ever seen a Nexus 6 anyone who's ever seen a Nexus 6 knows that phone was huge. The code name was Shamu. It was a very obtuse device, but that was a 6-inch screen on a phone. This is only 7 inches. Now, granted, that's the screen size, not with the bezels and things of that nature. The screen only goes from here to here, and the rest is bezel. So keep that in mind. But the reason I say that's a turning point is for a couple reasons. One, at the time, Shamu, at least in my mind, between that and the Note series from Android, was the biggest phone. It was the biggest phone out. It kind of bridged the gap between this tablet size. And granted, still, there were several iterations of iPad in between, all the same size. Still, the iPad dwarfs this Nexus 7. But it bridged the gap, right? This is something that you could put in a briefcase, in a purse, something that you could take with you while you're traveling, while you're going to school, whatever, on the bus. And it wasn't huge, but phones were getting bigger. And Samsung realized that with their Note series to the point where you had a pretty large phone, and then if you had a tablet, what's the point, right? So at this stage of the game, this Nexus 7, this tablet really did nothing different than its little brother, the Nexus 6. The Samsung did have tablets then as well, and their tablets did not much different than their phones. The difference was screen size, ease of use for people maybe who couldn't see, or sitting on a couch not wanting to be on your phone the whole time. And the reason, again, why I say that's a big deal is the point of the tablet at this stage of the game, which is 2012, 2013, there wasn't a difference, personally, in my opinion, of what a tablet did and what a smartphone did, besides screen size. Most of the time in history, it showed that the tablets generally had either more outdated software, it had either the same or lesser of a CPU in capacity. It did have a bigger battery because it had a bigger space to use it, so your screen on time would definitely show. But there wasn't anything that really stood out as why you would need the tablet versus a larger phone like it did when the 10-inch iPad came out and you had a 4.3-inch phone. That was a big deal. That was a big difference than most people realized. So again, fast forward a little bit more and you get to tablets like this. This is an LG tablet. It's a 6-inch tablet. I believe it's just called the Tab G6, something of that nature. I really don't know what it was called. I ended up getting this for free with a purchase from Newegg. But I bring this tablet up for a reason. So if you went on Amazon, eBay, Newegg, wherever right now and Googled Android tablet, you would come up with a plethora of options. And I mean like a ridiculous amount. I mean everything from Samsung and LG, bigger name people, of course iPads, all the way down to like when Motorola released their Motorola Zoom. And every brand in between, whether it be a one-off, maybe Chinese company or whatever selling a cheap tablet on Android 4, which just for people's reference, we're on Android 8 now. This is, I believe, is on Android 6, I believe. But there's dozens. You could go from $30 to, if you really went onto the high end, obviously, your iPad, your Galaxy Tabs, your Pro versions, I'm going to put up air quotes for Pro, they can run you several hundred to almost $1,000. But my point being is this tablet right here serves little to no function to me personally. If you're a person who has still an iPhone 4, an older Samsung, maybe not even a smartphone at all, this could be perfect for you. It's cheap, it's effective, it gets the job done. You can check your emails on the couch, you can watch some videos, you can watch your Netflix, and it's cost effective. Again, the tablets just seem to always have either outdated or going out of the technology world. So meaning like, there's a camera here, but I would never take a picture with this. The cameras are usually outdated, worse quality than the current smartphone and its family, and they just, if that's the only camera you had, obviously the gold saying of the best camera is the one you have with you, yes, this will obviously take a picture if you don't have anything else. But it's just not of quality as just its equal cell phone counterpart, right? So now let's talk about today. So today's world, again, there's dozens of tablets, from the cheap to the very expensive to something, like this over here, which is charging currently, but an iPad Pro. This is the 2015 13-inch, 12.9, whatever, iPad Pro. So this was their first giant iPad, right? And it has your Touch ID, it does have a camera at the back. But the big thing for this iPad was this little guy right here, the Apple Pencil. So Galaxy was doing this for a little bit with their S Pen and their Note series, and they made tablets that utilized the S Pen. Apple's big claim to fame at this point was this Apple Pen did a lot more as far as pressures and strokes, and all of that was all this technology that was both in the screen and in the pencil. So like, I can't use the pencil on the 2011 iPad, I can't even use it on my iPhone 10 or anything like that. It specifically works with the iPad Pro. Since then, they've had several different more versions. They've had a 10-inch, a new 12-inch, and a 9.7-inch iPad Pro. But again, this is expensive. And if you're not going to be someone who uses the Apple Pencil or the Smart Keyboard, which it has its dock for, this essentially, if you want to break it down, is a larger, older iPhone. And I say it for a couple of reasons. So when this came out, 2015, this was the A9 chip, which was the same chip they put in their phones. But the camera, right up here, didn't even have a flash, right? Didn't even have anything that really made it useful as a camera. So the camera if you actually read the specs for the new 2017 iPad Pro, is the same camera that is in the iPhone 7. So it just kind of shows you that technology, so yes, it might have the current chipset, it might have everything else current with technology, but they're still going to be lacking features. You're still going to have the Apple Pencil in the new one, and you're also going to have the dock, the ability to put your smart keyboard on. Why do you need this? Well, again, if you use Apple Pencil or other things like that, this could really work out for you as being a powerhouse for drawing, taking notes. I took this to class when I was still in college and took my notes on it all in one spot, didn't have a bunch of binders. It was great. But then again, you're also coming to a category where this is almost $1,000. This was a 32 gig, it wasn't a big one. You know, they make them all the way up to 256, and that's big money. You're getting into the category of two-in-one computers. You're getting into the category of the MacBook computer, laptop, you know, things of that nature, the Microsoft Surface and Surface Book. So now, today, it's just such a different landscape as far as what tablet brings to the table. So if you went with the high-end Galaxy, yes, you have the stylus, you have the keyboard, you have pressure-sensitive drawing, multi-touch, all that good stuff, and they're great. This iPad Pro is great. Even being a few years old, there's really not a whole lot of reasons why I would need a new one, right? So I was reading an article saying that people will obviously upgrade their phones more than devices like tablets, because this harder to see the age, okay? Because you may not pick this up every day. You may not be putting it through a lot of paces as far as very stressful activities, whereas your phone, you use it every day, you do a lot of stuff, you got a load of apps on it, you'll notice it more. My reason for bringing up of why tablets are relevant is, again, the cost, okay? So if you have $1,000 to spend, you can buy an iPad Pro or a two-in-one computer. What can you buy? Or what are you going to do, I guess, is the question. You could buy both or either. The two-in-one, again, you're going to have the power of a computer. Again, sometimes the two-in-ones aren't as powerful as their predecessors, but you can buy them fully spec'd out. Great computers that do turn around, have a full multi-touch touchscreen, can use a stylus like the Surface Book, where you can detach it, use it as a tablet with the pen, or put it in its keyboard dock and use it as a laptop. Those things, again, are expensive, but they do exist. You can get a cheap two-in-one, which is probably going to have a mobile-grade processor and, you know, maybe 32 or 64 gigs of flash memory, maybe 4 to 8 gigs of RAM, which, again, is going to be more than an iPad, and it's going to be more than the Samsung counterpart. So is there a place for them in today's market? Well, I think, again, in my opinion, I think that you're going to see tablets have to shit or get off the pot. And what I mean by that is they're either going to have to differentiate, become something unique, or they're just going to go away as a kind of unique sort of intermediary technology that was here, kind of like PDAs before smartphones. And what I mean by that is, so to me, the iPad Pro is more useful than an Android tablet or even the iPad Air, iPad Mini, any other iPad really in existence for a couple of reasons. You got a keyboard that doesn't need batteries and doesn't use Bluetooth, makes it very functional. You have a stylus that works as taking notes, drawing, a whole bunch of other stuff, and it's big enough that you can really utilize the screen real estate. I think iPads that are smaller than that, like maybe the iPad Mini, and I know they don't really make many minis, or even if they can still are going to continue to make them in the future, are just going to go away. I think tablets like these guys, the 6 and 7 inch tablets, again, there's probably going to be either a dozen of these around for the one-off brands, the cheap and inexpensive 4 or 5 Android versions earlier tablets that are just kicking around. Maybe you give them to your kids, almost like beater technology devices, or they're just going to go away. And I think computers like the Surface, I think computers like the MacBook, just the MacBook, not the Pro version, I think even they have to differentiate or go away. Because at $1,200 or $1,000, you could almost buy a 13-inch MacBook Pro, which has a lot more stuff on it, than the 12-inch. It just doesn't make sense. You're cannibalizing your own sales. And if you're selling an iPad for almost the same price as a MacBook, which you can put a keyboard on, which is going to have about the same, I'm going to say same, and people are going to get angry at me, about the same performance, because you're not going to run Final Cut on a normal MacBook, the thin little 12-inch MacBook. You're just not going to do it. You're not going to run any heavy editing software on the iPad Pro. You're going to be doing quick and dirty little edits to photos, maybe with Photoshop Express, things of that nature, and both computers will do that just fine. I think that's a spot where I know Apple wants to have choices, and choices are great, but choices are bad when they start eating out of your own market share. But I guess if they sell either one, they're still getting the money. But that could be the same that goes for Surface, that's the same that goes for Samsung, that's the same that goes with just about any other company out there. If you're releasing products that are almost the same, or do almost the same, but are just a little bit different, like when they made the Nexus 7 and the Nexus 6, they're basically the same thing. This didn't even have a camera, by the way. They did the same thing, almost had the same use besides making cell phone calls on this thing, which if you really wanted to get ingenious, you could do voice over IP and you could call from it. You know, there isn't a lot of need in the world for duplicate. So, you know, do people use tablets today? Of course they do. I use this one. I use it for taking notes on the job. I use it for sketching and drawing and things of that nature. But, I mean, am I going to look on the internet here? Sure. I can do the same on my phone, though. It's not a choice of this is easier. It's just as easy. Almost the same. What makes the difference is tablets like this. Tablets like the OG iPad. And if you still have an original iPad, congratulations. There's probably not many of these floating around in existence anymore. Especially if you still have the box. These are still useful. You could give this to a kid if it's beat up. You could use this just for putting it in the kitchen. Maybe you read recipes off it while you're doing stuff. Use it for a timer. Use it for just maybe playing some music outside, or again, in the kitchen, in the bedroom, whatever. You know, you could easily watch Netflix and YouTube and things of that nature on a tablet like this. And I'm not saying that there's not a place for them in the market. There absolutely is. I feel tablets like this are almost just a waste of space. And again, I'm probably going to get some flack for saying that, but reason being is there's so many devices that can do this, especially in this size. And when your smartphones are just inches away from being this size, I don't see why we have to release them, right? I know I got this one for free. I have no money invested in it. I have it. I used it, but it was just so ungodly slow and outdated with Android that none of the stuff that I really wanted to do on it, I could do with great ease. It took me maybe 5 minutes to load a game that I wanted to play. And I think tablets like this are going to get created into the pro space. And I use my air quotes for pro space because now it seems like a lot of companies are just throwing the pro word around just to throw it around. You know, the new MacBook Pro is pro, but at what cost, right? And the new iPad Pro, again, pro is in the word, or in the name, what makes it pro? I wouldn't necessarily call the stylus and keyboard support pro. I would say it definitely made it more useful, more for creative people. They're going to have to lean either into the pro or out and stay out of it. You know, the new iMac Pro, a little footnote on that. The new iMac Pro finally, in my opinion, I feel like is an actual pro device that makes sense. The normal Mac Pro that they released, a little like trash can looking computer that you could upgrade and work on, is more of a pro device because it has longevity, right? So, is it worth to get a tablet today? Honestly, it's going to come down to what are you going to do. If you're going to go out and drop $1,000 to $1,200 on an iPad Pro just because you think the iPad Pro is really cool, by all means, go for it. But I would urge you to seriously consider thinking about maybe buying an actual laptop, or if you're not invested into Mac and Apple, look at buying the Surface Book, or look at buying a Surface. I used the Surface for a very long time, and I had no problems. It worked great. That had a stylus as well, and you could have a keyboard cover, all of that stuff, and you actually had some I/O, be it a USB-A port and a micro SD card slot, so you could hook some stuff up to it. Where the iPad, you don't have that. So I urge people to consider what they would actually use the device for. If you want to buy a bunch of Amazon Fire tablets and give them to your kids, that's perfect. I'm sure they'll love them. It'll be great. They're inexpensive enough to where if something happens, it's not the end of the world. I wouldn't maybe advise giving them all iPad Pros. And, unless you have the original iPad or older devices, maybe it's time to retire them or keep them for one day. They might be worth something. You never know. Anyway, that is my little spiel about tablets, about the state of tablets and where I think they're going to go. So like I said, I think they're going to go either more towards the prosumer versus the consumer, or they're just going to phase and fizzle out of existence in the next maybe 5 years. Unless we get some, I know Apple's going to be putting Face ID in their next run of iPads. I'm sure that'll be the next thing. Bezel-less tablets, which I'm sure people will appreciate. I'm still waiting to get that all glass piece that has the holographic stuff on it that you see in some of the futuristic movies of the past 10 years or so. Waiting for that. When that comes, I'll have a shitload of them. But anyway, my name is Jared. I am from TechWorks, and I will see everyone in the next video.